two, one. Good morning, y'all. My name is Joshua Edwards. I am your host of the Shop Talk Quinny podcast, where we have meaningful, intentional, authentic conversations with entrepreneurs, professionals alike, and we talk about, the good, the bad, the ugly. Everything is fair game in these podcasts, and the thing that I truly appreciate is when you connect with somebody who is able to share their story and be transparent and do so in a way that really helps other people, listeners, people that tune into the show, and had a really wonderful conversation with the individual I'm about to introduce. The last time she was here, y'all know Theresa. From the last time she was here, she's the marketing director at Simple Desk, and I wanted to have her back on the show. Theresa, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm enjoying finally getting out into the community and starting to do some more networking things. That's been something that I haven't really had a lot of chance to do since COVID has been a thing. So it's been so nice. I love being busy, but I like actually being able to see everybody that I've been kind of working with for the last like 2.5 years to actually kind of connect with them.
That's amazing. And
Yeah.
it's funny, I just thought of a question just out of that. Like, do you find because I'm hearing that quite a bit, like people are just kind of starting to reconnect, networking in person and seeing people. And what have you observed or noticed kind of in your interactions? Because like you say, you're working with some of these people maybe from a digital lens, but then seeing them in person and having these interactions. What when you leave those settings, what kind of impact are you left with walking away from those settings, and maybe what have you observed with other people?
Yeah, so I think the first thing that I kind of want to like touch on for me, I always say that I'm kind of like an introvert masquerading as an extrovert because in the marketing world, you have to be very extroverted to kind of do the line of work that we do. And I always feel kind of introverted. So usually, like these kinds of events, like networking events, kind of make me a little bit nervous sometimes. But like I'm finding I'm not really having those responses because most of the people that I'm kind of networking with, I've already kind of laid the groundwork and I've been working with them for 1 to 2 years now. So it's made that process a lot easier for me. It's not like that small idle like small talk that a lot of people don't like. It's very engaging because I already have that foundation. But I'm
Hmm.
finding that it's just also like um people are just loving it. Like people are just excited. They want to do that connection. For a lot of people, that's what they've been kind of missing. Just being able to connect one to one with people. So I'm just seeing a lot of positive response and just excited, like smiling faces, which makes my job a lot easier as well, too, right? Just to feel that excitement.
Wow. I got to go back to something that you said, because
Yeah.
I thought it was so powerful and profound. You said small talk.
Yeah.
Nope, nobody likes that.
No.
Do you find like because let's go back before COVID.
Yeah.
Let's go back to before this all went down and everybody was out and about and everything was quote unquote normal. Like, did you see a lot of like small talk happening in the networking space? Was that something that like you observed and you participated in but didn't necessarily like what was your experience with small talk in business situations? And it doesn't even have to just be networking, but what's your experience been with that, and kind of what was your perception of that, or observation of that?
Yeah, to me, honestly, I always found myself really dreading that small, like, talk aspect of it because I just find it's really difficult to find a genuine connection sometimes and segue into those meaningful connections. It's not always possible in kind of a networking setting, but I was working for one of North America's largest publishing companies prior to working with Simple Desk. So they owned 4 or 5 different magazines, and we did a networking event in Vegas. So they're in the pet industry. So we went to like this huge kind of event and had a lot of small talk. And I just absolutely, personally, I just despised it because I was like, I just really want to get to what you're passionate about, but there was just so much like, I've got to meet this person, I've got to meet this person. So it was all very small piecemeal types of conversations. So I'm just finding that I'm not even having those. We're just kind of getting right into the conversations now. But before, I absolutely just dreaded it because it's like, we'll talk about the weather or like, like very brief things that to me are just really hard to get into. So I'm really glad that I'm not
Mm-hmm.
having that conversation anymore.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And if y'all notice, my I'm grinning here on the podcast today. I'm grinning because I 100, no, I 1,000% agree with Theresa when she says I don't like small talk.
Yeah.
I don't like small talk
Don't
because
like
I
it.
do not. I do not like small talk. It's like, it's like you said, like you talk about the weather, you
Yeah.
talk about, it's like, man, like, let's get to the meat and potatoes of
Yes.
like, what are we really dealing with? Like,
Yeah.
people are out here and they're hurting,
Yeah.
or they're super excited about something, and then they feel like, oh my goodness, I shouldn't have the audacity to share my excitement
Yeah.
because somebody else might just look at me like, oh my goodness, you're a weirdo. Like,
Yeah.
oh, like, can we get past all the fluff and like, let's just get real with
Yes.
one another?
Yes.
And so I'm super, super excited. I haven't been out all that much. Like, I'm
Yeah.
it's very rare for me to leave my humble abode. I love it here. I do.
Yeah.
I do. But when I do get out and I have those one-to-ones, I find they're always intentional, always below the surface, like you said, meaningful, no airy fairy fluff talk. And
Yeah.
I love it. And if that's one of the things that kind of comes out of this whole 2-year debacle we've been through, then
Yes.
I'm here for that.
Yes. 100%.
Oh man, woo! I love that. I love that statement. Small talk. I don't like it.
Don't like it.
No. So okay, so go with me here then, because we're talking about the networking, and we're talking about, and I appreciate and understand like that kind of like nervousness, because I get that as well. And it's funny, I heard somebody kind of explain like extrovert and introvert in a way that I didn't really notice it before. And I guess like they were mentioning like introvert is somebody that loses energy after like being around people, and extrovert somebody that gains energy.
Yeah.
And for me, it actually depends on the group.
Yeah.
I don't know if you find that as well, because there's some groups I'd be around where I leave that group meeting and I'm energized. Like, actually,
Yeah.
I'm on like cloud nine. I'm ready to go take over the world. Like, and then there's other groups I leave and I just want to go to bed.
Yeah. Yes. Recently
Do you
had that
find that?
experience. Yes, yeah, we just had a event at the beginning of June where we kind of were we had a couple of guest speakers just kind of talking about like how to take your own branded photography, so some like tips and strategizing. And that event, I usually as an introvert I would have been like, oh, I got to take a break. That was a lot of socializing for me because it was a full day. But because of everybody else's responses and the energy that they kind of brought with them and their excitement about what they learned through the day, I just found myself really like energized, really excited about where they were headed in their own businesses, even though they weren't businesses that we necessarily collaborated with. It's just other people in the community that we were just kind of sharing that information with. And then there's the standard like mixers where you're just like very basic, like 5-minute conversations, maybe 10 minutes at most with other people. And then you're just like, okay, I'm done. Even if it's a half a day, it's just too much. It's just like I find if it's a genuine connection or if that person's very easy to talk to, it just makes that excitement level for you more tangible or like more reasonable. You can kind of go through your day. But if it's a little bit of a struggle, then it's just like that's my networking amount for the day. That's my people pleasing kind of hour. And now I'm just going to take some time for myself. So I do find that depending on the setting for sure.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally relate to that. And oh man, it's funny. I gotta ask you this now,
Yeah.
because so I find, because of my dislike of the surface stuff,
Mhm.
I find I will go out of my way to bring up something about myself that is vulnerable or transparent or private, whatever the case may be, just to kind of look for any type of or sense any type of relatability in the person I'm talking to.
Yeah.
And I find 9 times out of 10, they will then begin to subconsciously think and then bring up things that they would not have had I not gone through that little exercise. Do you find in your networking and your communication, are you finding that there's things that you're seeing where there's opportunities to kind of bring something out of somebody that maybe they're not letting it go at initially, but then as conversation goes on, or how, or whatever the case may be, they kind of bring it up. Are you seeing anything like that? Are you doing anything that's kind of cultivating these meaningful conversations, if you will?
Yeah. I think too, like even with Zoom, like we've obviously been doing a lot of Zoom stuff just because it's what we've been doing for COVID, obviously not a lot of in-person things. And I think for me, especially working with business owners, a lot of them are really hesitant to talk about themselves or to do that storytelling aspect of their business because they genuinely like it could be anything. They could have self-esteem issues, or they just don't think that they're that important to talk about, or they want to seem more professional, so they want to kind of keep their face out of the business. And so when we're kind of having these conversations initially about like where they need areas of support, it's usually those people that you kind of have to do a little bit of digging to kind of get them to open up and say like, this reason why you started your business or your passion's exciting for people, it's interesting for people, and you kind of need to share that. So sometimes I will pull something relatable for myself, like as the conversation goes, you just kind of know like I kind of get a sense of connection from them, or I just do my research prior to having the meeting and kind of get to the meat of their business. And then I usually kind of ask some specific questions to kind of get them outside of that scope of here's what I need, like this is what I'd like to see, like out of that rigidity and just moving to more of a fluid conversation. It sometimes does take a little bit of prompting, but that's really where you get to the nuggets of interesting storytelling or interesting pieces or things that you can kind of work with is when you get kind of beyond that surface level.
Wow, wow, that's super key and valuable. I appreciate that. And for anybody listening, that'll be listening to this podcast, yeah, what I'm getting from that is we don't have to necessarily wait
Mhm.
for them to get to a place where they just feel comfortable enough. Sometimes you have to kind of draw it out of them in a way that isn't forceful, but it's
Yeah.
intentional
Yes.
rather, and allows it to happen organically. I like that.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, well, because if they knew what that's what people wanted to hear, I think they would be doing it sooner. So sometimes it's just that prompting, right? Like that it is interesting and just giving them that little push that it's okay to talk about yourself or talk about your fails or talk about your wins, and people just think that that's something that nobody wants to see, but I'm like, I want to see that. I think that stuff is interesting, and people will of course get that connection with you. It won't just be a product or a service. It's an actual connection to a face behind a brand. So that's really what I always try to draw out of any conversation I'm having.
Absolutely love it. Absolutely love it. I totally want to go here with you because I'm so interested in your thought process on this, what you've observed in the marketplace, and what you yourself think about this topic. And it's around marketing,
Yep.
specifically on social media, and looking at, obviously, we've seen so many different trends, so many different announcements of
Yeah.
late, of different things coming down the pipe. It seems every day, every hour, there's something new that, whether we have to pay attention to, inform our clients about, etc.
Yeah.
And I want to hear from you, and I'm also very curious. So this is a bit of a selfish question as well. Like, how do you, as an individual who just also happens to be in the industry, um, internalize all of these updates, And the real, like, I like, are you excited about every single one that comes out? Do any of them annoy you? Like, is there any, like, is it kind of like, oh my goodness, here we go again?
Yeah.
What's the vibe? What's the energy? What's the overall kind of perspective that you have when you see all of these different changes and things that come down the pipe, especially with social?
Yeah, so obviously for my line of work, it's really important for me to keep up to date, but there are so many updates all the time that sometimes you always just feel like I'm falling behind a little bit. Like there's so many newsletters and things that I subscribe to just to keep up to date on these things. So for me, it's just kind of walking through whether or not it's relevant for my clients to know. Like if I'm working with them and I can handle it, then I will just internalize that. Okay, what do I need to know? What do I need to improve? What do I need to change? What does that look like? And I don't necessarily inform unless that's major to like an overhaul or it's changes the way that we're implementing the work that we're doing for them. Like they don't really, some of them don't need to know that the aspect ratio has changed on an image. Like they don't need to know that because they don't care about that. So for me, it's just like, okay, what is the most important thing and how do I implement that into what I'm already doing or what do I have to change? So that's kind of how I focus on that. Now, if there's anything major, like if I'm doing video editing for a client and the aspect has changed, I might have to say, you need to change the way that you're shooting from horizontal to vertical so that it fits better on social medias. I might have to say that. But for the most part, I just try to keep it as underwhelming, I guess you would say, as possible for the client, because even me having to keep update with it, I'm like, oh, we just had a change like 2 weeks ago and now we're having another one, right? So I just keep them informed on what they absolutely need to know and I just handle the rest. Um, and for me too, it's like not everything that comes out is necessarily relevant to some of my clients, depending on what their strategy is. Just because Instagram and Facebook are out there doesn't mean that everybody's doing both of those pieces. So I just apply it on a like a per client basis. And then obviously Simple Desk has to on a wider array, like have all of these platforms. So it can be a lot. And I really feel for people who struggle to just create, like business owners who just struggle to create on a basic level, because it's like they just get familiar with something and then it's like, oh, here we go, like something else has changed. So if I see something happening, like even if they're not working with us, I might just shoot them a message if I'm familiar with them and just say, hey, you might want to stop doing this just because this came out and you might want to do it this way. I just try to help out as much as possible. But yeah, for the most part, I just try to keep up to date as much as I can and not get overwhelmed because there are so many changes happening. And if I don't understand them, my clients are going to understand them. So I really just take it day by day and figure out what needs to change for them, if anything.
I love that. I love
Yeah.
that. Taking it day by day, like, to me, that's huge.
Yeah.
Um, because when I hear taking it day by day, I hear like running at my own pace.
Yes. Yeah. And I think when you say taking it day by day too, some people say like, "Oh, wouldn't you fall behind?" And I say not necessarily, because you can be strategic in your implementation, which is where you always like stay ahead of the game. Like you might have a month or 2 months worth of content planned, but then you just don't get yourself overwhelmed with, okay, they said in 2 weeks this is going to roll out, or because things change, right? So it's like, what's happening right now? I have my content ready, and if anything needs to change, then I'll hop on and do that. But like, don't get overwhelmed with everything, because you're just going to get to a point where you're going to shut down and you're not going to be able to even do the basics for your business because it's just going to be too much.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, because yeah, like, to keep up with
Yeah.
everything, like, in real time, especially for agencies of our size, it's impossible.
Oh, it's yeah, it's insane.
I'm just gonna put it on Front Street in case
Yeah.
any small business wasn't aware.
It's
Um,
impossible.
it's impossible. Okay, I'm just gonna throw that out there.
Yeah.
Um, but that's not a bad thing. It just means we have to be critical thinkers in as
Yeah,
far as, what we implement, when we implement it, and ultimately looking at, like, what value is it going to provide to you, the
exactly.
customer, because not
Yep.
everything not everything is fruitful for your campaign. Not everything is
Exactly.
fruitful for your business. So we
Yep.
we don't just kind of say squirrel every time we see an update. I think great marketers,
Can
they
you
they
imagine?
Oh my goodness, Teresa, right? Like,
We never get anything
um,
done.
well, exactly. It's like the age old, sitting in a boardroom debating versus like let's just try something that we don't fully know is going to work and let's learn as we go. Like I'm
Yeah.
much more interested in executing than
Yeah.
sitting around in a boardroom debating new updates.
Exactly. Yep.
And whoo, I love it. I love it. I love it. It's yeah, like, and I love what you said about like, you kind of pick and choose what to communicate to your clients based on like, what their campaign's all about, what's going to be relevant to them, things of that nature. And I think that's great. As marketers, we should be doing that. And it kind of helps the client too. They're not so caught up in all of the noise. They know,
Yes.
hey, she'll let us know, what's relevant, what's not relevant, that type of thing.
Yeah, I give them the high level just summary of whatever you need. Or if there's something like sometimes our social media will be like, if you're like, we just did a thing on Facebook groups, like whether or not it's a value to you, because everybody's saying like go to Facebook groups because there's less issues with the algorithm and you can have a direct line of communication. But it's just like, it might not necessarily be a part of your sales funnel or something that you even need to bother with. So why waste your time on something if it's not going to help you get any further in where you want to go? So that's usually what I do. I just say whether or not it's relevant, here's the summary of what you need to know. And then we'll like I obviously handle it, like saying this is what has changed and I'll handle it for you. But it is important that they feel empowered through knowledge about what's going on so that they're not just left hanging if something has changed.
Very cool. Very
Yeah.
cool. Yeah. I'll just throw this out there as a random question. Like, do
Yeah.
you obviously there's a lot of messages and maybe one might say mixed messages coming from our industry, people that do what we do. Do you like see any messages out there that you kind of like shake your head at, like, oh my goodness, you're totally giving the end consumer the wrong idea? This is totally blown out of proportion. Have you observed any of that in your time in this industry? And if you feel comfortable to share anything that sticks out to you when you think about that.
Yeah, well, because I've been in industry for like going on 6 years now, things have changed so frequently. So, and I totally identify with the struggle to just keep up with it. So sometimes I will see people that will be giving like outdated advice. So like some like a strategy or something that was relevant like even 6 months prior. I've seen people do that, and I just kind of think to myself, "Oh, you're a little bit behind on that," but that's not really obviously my area to correct. That's their due diligence to kind of keep up to date. I've never seen anything that's been like a huge red flag to me, like in terms of advice. Because normally I don't interact with that. Like usually people are pretty good, but I do sometimes see things where people are trying to be helpful, but they make it really um, like difficult for that individual to understand. So like they don't really use a lot of layman's terms. It's really like specific things that people just don't understand. And like having work with small to medium businesses, a lot of them don't know anything about marketing. They're not up to date with it. If you don't just say it in basic terms, they're not going to understand. So sometimes I see things and I'm like, I get that it's coming from a well-intentioned place, but it's like you just need to give them the basics. Just give them everything that they need to know. So if they're going to implement it, that they actually can do so and that they're not just scratching their heads like what's going on. I'm fortunate I've not seen anything terrible. Unfortunately, in the outsourcing kind of world, I've seen a lot of clients kind of get taken advantage of, unfortunately, prior to kind of working with us. And that's always a challenge because then they just have this genuine like mistrust of outsourcing companies. So that's like, it's almost like a little bit of therapy. Like when I'm doing the work with them, it's like, this is the right way to do it. And this is what we're going to do to kind of fix what's happened in the past and we'll kind of make it better. But I've never seen any bad advice, just people kind of going with in the wrong direction. And that's been in I've lived in Kingston and worked in marketing, Peterborough worked in marketing. You see it everywhere. It's just kind of one of those things, unfortunately.
Got it. Got it. I love what you said about like using layman's terms for
Yeah.
for things like I always say to people like there's always a gap between
Yeah.
like what you the brand knows about the services and products that you offer versus the end consumer. And I always tell people, I say, yeah, when you get to our industry, times that gap by 10.
Yes. It's so true.
So now you really have to be intentional with like the words we
Yes.
use, right? Because it's like it's so, and I find like the market is I've met so many different types over the years, and I've seen a lot of like miseducation on things, and then like and then that's when the expectations are typically through the roof. It's like,
Yeah.
you know, as soon as I pay a dime, like my whole business needs to turn around in like a day. Like you
Yeah.
you you see those clients come through, and it's like, oh my goodness, who did you work with before
Yes.
you came here?
Yes.
Oh man, that's funny. That's funny. So as we're getting close to wrapping up, I want to hear just a little bit more of like your personal journey in the present,
Mhm.
because obviously you're a family person.
Yes.
Um, you have a husband
Yeah.
and one child. Am
Yeah,
I
I
correct?
do. Yeah.
Yep. And you know, there's obviously a family dynamic, and then there's what you do. Have you what is your what are you kind of seeing and observing or learning even about yourself in the journey of like family life, work life, prioritizing things, and just kind of like finding, you know, a balance that works for you? What is some things that you're observing that you're liking or even disliking in that space?
Yeah, so I touched on this a little bit the last time we talked, but I think for me sometimes it's my own expectations of myself. So I've always been somebody that really enjoys working, and I it's a weird thing, but like the busier that I am, the better that I feel, because like okay, I can do all of these things and then I feel really accomplished at the end of the day. But I have learned a lot since having my daughter about unrealistic expectations for myself, and then putting those out into the world about what I'm able to achieve. So that's really been a work in progress for me, understanding that me saying that I can't take on a project or I need more time for things and I can't just get things done super quickly isn't like anything against myself. It's nothing that talks about my skills or anything, or my professionalism or anything like that. It's just me saying like I need some me time and I need time to decompress, because we're dealing with a lot of different clients, different attitudes, different projects. So it can be a lot. It can be pretty overwhelming. So I'm just giving myself a lot of grace, but I'm also working on like limiting beliefs for myself. So like I've always been really hard on myself. So as a mom, I'm really conscious about okay, if I am saying these things about myself or I'm vocalizing them, there is somebody smaller than me kind of listening in and hearing those kinds of things. So it's being really mindful about how I'm kind of talking about myself, and then like how I'm believing in my own self. So there's that kind of aspect for it. And I don't think anybody in the world has a perfect balance of work and life. If we did, I think people will be a lot happier. So I just strive to do as good of a job as I can and understand that there's nobody in the world that's perfect. There's no perfect mom. There's no perfect worker, employee, or business owner. It's just everybody's just doing the best that they can. So just give yourself a little bit of grace and a pat on the back when you're feeling like you just haven't maybe done as much as you expected to do.
Love that. Love that. Um, yeah, it's I love your perspective on, you know, just giving yourself grace and just walking through things and being intentional about taking that time away. So important, so
Mhm.
important. The last question I want to ask, I've been dying to ask this question, um, and it was something that you kind of engaged with on I think it was LinkedIn,
Yeah.
and I was like, oh my goodness, I want to know kind of like what she thinks, her thought process around this. And I think the question was about um, like what are you more afraid of? And the question, like the options were like taking risks or staying stagnant. So
Mhm.
my question to you is, um, what is your answer to that question about what are you more afraid of, taking risks or staying stagnant, and why would you say you answered that way?
Yeah, I think I remember the poll that you had put up, and I think originally I had said taking risks. But I think I would probably change my answer now to um, the other one where it's like remaining stagnant. And I think I've worked honestly with like a couple of life coaches, just like through Simple Desk, and just kind of having these conversations. And for me, it feels like when you're taking a risk, you don't want to, because you're like, even if the place that I'm at isn't quite the place that I want to be, at least it feels comfortable. But I think that that's a bit of an illusion. Like, it's not actually comfortable. It feels like it's comfortable to us, but really it's uncomfortable, because we all want to move towards something that fulfills us, whether or not it's like a new job or buying a new house or whatever it is. We all want to move forward, but we kind of keep ourselves in this box of what's achievable and just say this is my safe space. So I would say now, thinking about the time since I took that poll, it is a little bit remaining stagnant, because I am doing a lot of like internal work, that kind of I feel like also reflects in the work that I'm doing for others, where I'm just like, what's scarier to me is just muting down my potential or watering it down for somebody else, when realistically, like, I have a lot to offer. I just like, I need to be out there connecting with people, and I don't do that enough. So like, I'm trying to force myself out of that box just to get out there, because I do feel like I do have a lot to offer people, like in the services that we do here at Simple Desk. So it's just like, I have to get myself out of that box. But it's a weird way kind of thinking, because it's like, okay, if I don't take risks, then I'm going to stay where I am. But then if I take risks, there's a lot of things that can kind of result as a fallout of that. So you're kind of feel like it's a damned if I do, damned if I don't kind of situation. So you just kind of have to figure out, do a lot of soul searching about, for you, what's the worst thing. And I do think that for me, it's just keeping myself closed off and not showing people like who I am as an individual and as a professional.
I really, really appreciate that answer.
Oh, good.
Um,
That's a good answer.
yeah, no, I really do, and I think it's going to help some people. I know we're up on time here, but just
Yeah.
one more follow-up question, because I just know this is going to help somebody, because it's evident that you kind of had the initial answer of like taking risks was the thing you're the most afraid of, and then it kind of switched from that to like staying stagnant became the thing that you became more afraid of. So what I want to hear from you is just like what happened in the middle, like what was like that, if you can pinpoint that limiting belief or gut feeling, or fear of, that you had to really like combat to go from like where you started to where you ended up, like what would you say that was for you?
Yeah, so I think for me, it was probably a combination of two things. Usually, when I'm working with clients, I just like give it my all, and I've had a lot of people like kind of come back and say like, I literally could not I couldn't run my business without you, and I just kind of would be like, it's not a big deal, like that's just what I do, and I'm glad I could kind of help you in the areas that you kind of need. But I started to kind of actually take that as what it was, and it was a compliment and it was appreciation. So when people say that, I no longer brush that off and say it's not a big deal, because it is a big deal. Like, what I'm doing is really providing a lot of value to people, and it is helping them. So I'm starting to internalize that appreciation and allowing that to kind of sink in. Away from a professional kind of scope, I do a lot of my background is in English, so like I have a degree in English literature. So I used to do a lot of writing, and it was just something that I kind of fell off the wagon kind of doing. I just always made an excuse for why I couldn't kind of get into it. So I started making it a purpose to kind of get back into doing what I love, which is writing stories, short stories, and novels. So I kind of dove back into that, and I was reading over some of my older drafts, and I'm like, why did I always think that I wasn't good at this? Or why did I always think that I have to keep these kinds of things hidden instead of sharing them with people, like trying to get something published or publishing them on like online, or just doing something to kind of share the talent. Like I could see my skills shining through. And I was like, I just need to stop saying these things to myself, right? And just
Mm.
let myself try. And if I fail, then I know that I at least tried, rather than getting to be like 80 years old. I hope I can get that old. But you know what I mean? Just being like, I wish that I had done these things with my work, or I wish that I had just appreciated things a little bit more. So it was a little bit of a combination of the two. So it's really been quite transformative for me to kind of do a lot of this inner work and understand um, my own self a little bit better. And then that, I think that has helped a lot personally for me to give a lot more, because I'm feeling more fueled internally, that I'm able to kind of give more to people that way. So yeah, it was a combination, but it's been really, really transformative for me.
That's huge.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is so huge. I Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Of course.
Um, I think I want to clip that and share it with my staff. I think they would appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was motivating.
Oh,
Really,
good. Good.
really enjoy that. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what I love about these conversations, Josh. Honestly, I thought that the last time just took off because people just, it resonated with them. Everybody's burnt out, everybody's kind of overwhelmed. They're trying to set unrealistic expectations for themselves. And I think our conversation was just like, you don't have to do that. You don't have to go into a workplace and burn yourself to the ground and then have nothing left for yourself. And like, thank you for doing this podcast, because I think that you teach people from different aspects. Like, you take all these entrepreneurs and you show these hard things, but then show the good stuff that comes out of it too. And that's very, very, I think, impactful for people, and starts getting their mind working in out of those harmful ways and into something a little bit more positive.
Thank you.
You're
Thank you.
welcome.
Yeah, it's interestingly enough, it's therapy for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I've heard from others, it's therapy for them. So
Yeah.
I can't lose doing something like this. And
No, no.
I just see, I've seen the just the impact even on just myself with doing it, and that's why I probably won't stop doing it. I just
Yes.
too much joy from doing it. But Teresa, thank you so much.
You're welcome anytime.
We came together today again, and we had some real meaningful meaningful
Yeah.
conversations, and shared a lot, and I just appreciate your heart. And anybody who ain't following this lady, uh go check her out. Go check out Simple Desk. Give them a follow. She is a huge impact on this community, great impact on myself, and
Thank you.
yeah, just
Thank you so
wish you
much.
the best in everything that you're doing, Teresa.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. That's all for today, y'all. We will see you the next time on Shop Talk Quinny. Until then, peace.